thank you for this wonderful panel. I'm Pat Kemp, I'm superintendent of the school district here, and I'm not here to defend anything. I'm actually here to agree with most everything that you've said. One of the things that I think is really important, and I spent the last 5 years before I came to Lafayette in New Orleans and watched as the charter movement came in and some of the truths and the untruths that were there. Before that, I spent 10 years in Macomb, Mississippi, and we developed a school system there that we're using a lot of the same models that we're using here in Lafayette now. And one of the things we did, and I think you're from New Orleans, we brought in that group that does the undoing racism. And and we basically forced our whole faculty, custodians, all the way up to central office people to go through that 3-day training. And it was pretty amazing, the reaction that we got and the lack of information that most of our folks, even a lot of our black employees, especially our white employees, the lack of information they had about black history and everything that had happened. And once we finished that, there was a much greater understanding. And from that, we developed 2 courses to put into our school system. One was at the 7th grade, and one was at the 9th grade, and they were mandatory courses. And they were basically not just about black history, but diversity in general, but they talked about black history, they talked about a lot of things. That's one of the dreams that Mr. Cobb and I have had for Lafayette Parish, but we obviously can't do it with the school board that we have now. Now, this is not a political thing, but I want you to know 2 things that I wish you would do. One is I wish you would come to the budget meeting on Monday, because the budget that I and Mr. Cobb are presenting does everything that you're talking about in terms of trying to get more resources to the F and the D schools, the very schools that Mr. Chavez represents. But we have a school board that is going to counter my budget with a budget that takes away about $6 million and takes away all of those things that were going to go to the F and the D schools and put it into a savings account. So one of the things that I think would be helpful is all of you showed up and said, wait a minute, this is you're hurting the poor and the minority. But nobody but Mr. Chavez ever shows up. He's the only one that ever talks. And it's hard for me to speak to that. It's hard for Mr. Cobb to speak to that. But if we had 150 black Americans or African Americans to show up at the school board meeting and say, wait a minute, it's very apparent what you're doing here. You're again making sure all the white people, in their mind have the resources, and you're taking away all the resources from these kids that are mostly in this northern part of the city and the parish, mostly black, mostly poor. And we're going to need your help with that. So I want to urge you to look at that. The second thing I want to urge you to look at is, you've got members, look, I think we have a racist school board, sure do. But I think you probably have one black member on that school board who fights for you, and that's Mr. Cobb. And I think you have another black member who doesn't fight for you. He votes against everything that's going to help the north part of the parish. And look, I don't care. I'm like you. I've made it. I've got a nice home. I've got everything. But you know what? You're going to raise another generation of kids that are going to end up in prison if we don't make some changes. But you have to step up to the plate with us. And I hope we have that room full on Monday at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cooper. We appreciate you taking the time out to come to our forum.